My story today is about those winter seasons in our lives, which can be very hard, but can also be a gift. My favourite short walk in the world went from our house in Court Bay in Cape Town, directly out of the house. It squeezed between our house and the neighbour's garage and then up onto the hillside. And I could get onto the firebreak and follow the firebreak as it contoured around the hill, walk for a couple of kilometres around the whole side of the hill to the back side of the hill, and then follow a series of steps up over the hill as if I was coming back to our house. You'd climb for maybe 300 or 400 metres up to the saddle, and then from the saddle I would scramble up to the left, heading to the north, onto the limestone crag. And eventually, if you knew where to find it, you found a crevice, a cleft in the rock, which opened up into a cave. At that point you could walk in. It was a high crack in the rock, about 10 foot high. You could walk into this cave, not realising just how the cave would change as you went through. It was a cave known as Boomslang Cave, which is an African snake, long and thin. And this cave was a long, thin cave which entered the mountainside on the south side, on the fishhook side of the mountain, and went right through the mountain from one side to the other, about 200 metres long, and came out on the other north side of the mountain. It took about 15 or 20 minutes to work your way through the cave, and it was an amazing adventure. If you had a good torch and some candles, you could set off walking, and then as you went through the cave, the whole cave changed. It went from being a tall, thin cave, went around a corner and opened up into a large cathedral cavern. It was huge. And if you took in a bunch of tea lights and different candles, you could light them in different places on the rock, and it opened the whole expanse of this cave up. It was amazing. As you carried on through the cave, you came to another part which we called Bat Cave. It was a lower ceiling. It was much more of a rounded cave, and often bats were flying in and nesting in this part of the cave. There was a spooky, dark, closed-in feel to this part of the cave. But as you rounded another corner, you would begin to see a speck of light in the distance. And as you made your way towards the light, the cave became thinner and narrower until eventually you were crawling. You were crawling in the sand, and it became so low that you actually had to push. If you were carrying a rucksack, you had to either push it ahead of you or pull it behind you. You couldn't crawl with this rucksack. You would be rubbing it on the roof of the cave, and so you crawled your way towards the light. Eventually you would come out into the light on the other side of the mountain into Echo Valley. Echo Valley was north facing, and where you'd come in from the south side, which was open and exposed to the winds, often the wind had blown away any morning cloud. When you came into Echo Valley, which was north facing, it was as if there was a completely different geographical climatic system. It could be full of mist and cloud, and you came out from the darkness almost into a different world. Even the geography was different because there was a lot more dampness on this side of the mountain. It was mossy, there was yellowwood trees, there was a heavy dampness to the feel. The rock was slippery, and as you walked your way down into Echo Valley, it was a completely different feeling. I would then turn to the right and follow Echo Valley back down to the road and back to our house. And in the space of a 2-hour walk, it was as if I experienced two completely different worlds, linked up by this cave, this 10, 15, 20 minutes of darkness, coming from one world into another world. In 2011, we left South Africa, having lived in southern Africa for the previous 13 years, and we headed back to the UK, and that transition from South Africa to England really was like passing through Boomslang Cave. It was almost as extreme as that. We went from one world that we knew to another world that we also knew, but it was so completely different. We discovered that transition was really, really hard. 2010 and 11 was a difficult season in our lives anyway. Coming to a close in South Africa was hard. It was emotional time. Finances were difficult. We felt that ministry was changing. There were lots of doors that were beginning to close that suggested it was time to leave. So when we headed back to the UK, we didn't yet know what the future was going to hold. We didn't yet know where we would be going. We were kind of in a limbo. We were in this liminal state, coming out of a cave and not knowing what lay ahead. I was also personally going through a difficult time in ministry. I'd been through a major conflict with another person in the wider network that we were working with. There had been slander made against me, and it was a difficult season for me. Probably the best thing we did in those first weeks back in the UK in November, we headed up to Scotland and we went to the YWAM team at Seamill, and we had a 2-week retreat there. It really was superb. It was wonderful to be with a group of people who recognised the transition that we were in, who recognised that we were actually in the darkness of a cave and we had not yet properly emerged. We didn't yet know what we were going to be doing. We had come back to a country that was our home. It was our passport nation, but it no longer felt like home. We were coming back to friends who were good friends, but their lives had changed. They'd been promoted. They had bigger houses. They had more cars. Their life had changed in a way that ours hadn't. Ours had changed, but it changed differently to theirs. And this threw up many questions. It was hard. During that reflection and retreat time in Seamill, we spent time meditating on Psalm 84, verse 5. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, or tears, they make it a place of springs. It was really great to be with a group of people who recognise that life is a journey. It's not a destination, it's a journey. We're in a journey of becoming. Life is not simply about being or doing, we're becoming, and we're in this journey, and it's a pilgrimage. And in the pilgrimage, there are different seasons. There are seasons of busyness and there are seasons of quiet. There are roadside taverns and there are long, hot, dry sections. And the invitation to see our journey as a pilgrimage was really significant for me. I recognise that in my journey of faith, you go through different times. And particularly in times of transition, you really need the wisdom of people who've walked that way before. Hebrews 12 talks about we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And part of us being able to run our race with perseverance is having the input of that cloud of witnesses. At that time, we drew alongside some elders and really got some wisdom from them. I remember one of those people wrote me an email and she quoted an Egyptian Coptic priest, and he had said, in the West, we see the normal signs of success in terms of wealth and popularity and prestige. But in the kingdom, there's an economy of suffering, poverty of spirit, and persevering in times of unjust attack and slander are success. And I recognised that actually for me, this conflict situation I was going through, for me to be able to persevere in a time of slander without defending myself was success in itself. When we drew alongside two elders who are leaders, had been leaders in the region where we're now working, she spoke into my life and she helped me recognise that this conflict situation could be one of two things. There could be an invitation to really seek resolution and to find a greater role for myself in that network. Or it could be that resolution would not be possible, and that this was actually a sign. It was a dead end. It was time to leave that aspect and to seek something completely new. And as I prayed and thought about it, it really felt like the second part was actually what was happening, that this was a dead end and I was to enter into a new season. As I spoke to the husband, he really helped me see that actually what I was going through wasn't simply a transition. This was a hard time. This was actually a wilderness season in my life. He suggested that I read, which was actually rereading because I'd read it before, I read Robert Clinton's book, The Making of a Leader. Clinton talks about the wilderness season that many people go through, often in their 40s, 50s. It's a kind of a season, you might call it a midlife crisis. It's a time of questioning and reflecting and processing and evaluating the past season, the season of maturing ministry where they've said yes to everything and taken on many roles. And now they're in a place of stillness, hopefully, and evaluating, hopefully, and probably pruning away some of those things that they've been doing so that they can enter a new season of probably doing less, but actually achieving more a season of greater fruitfulness because they've pruned away some of the excess activity that they shouldn't be involved in anymore. This invitation to see this season as a wilderness season was actually really helpful for me. It also helped me to see it as a winter season. And another great book I've been reading recently is Mark Buchanan's book, Following Jesus, Spiritual Rhythms, Following Jesus in Every Season of the Soul. And he talks there about the winter seasons, these seasons of darkness, which are really, really important. And I recognise that winter is actually something to embrace. One theory of development, which I came across when I was studying African history, suggests that European development happened more quickly than in the warmer southern hemisphere because of winter. That actually winter meant that the germs were killed off each year more easily in the north, which prevented plagues. It laid down dead vegetation, which became very fertile soil. The winter season forced people, because of coldness, to innovate and find better forms of clothing and heating and housing. So it actually led to technology. It forced people to build houses and to settle long term. It led to urbanisation rather than hunter nomads. It gave people an enforced time of rest, which helped lead to planning for the future. By contrast, the hotter southern hemisphere, which was less extreme, had more year-round fruits, less need for planning ahead, less need for development and housing, less urbanisation, less technology. Now, it's a simplistic theory, but I could see in that something of the gift that winter has been, even in the world, and to what extent winter is a gift for me. As I thought about this, I recognised that winter, this winter season that I went through 10 years or so ago, was a time, it was an invitation to be still. It was an invitation to stop activity. It was an invitation to evaluate, to ask hard questions about what I was doing. It was an invitation to prune away some of the things that I didn't need to continue to do. And I took that invitation. I took time out and I did a master's, and I spent time evaluating the past decade of my life. I recognise as well that it's an invitation to rest. It's an invitation to silence and to solitude and to reflection. I loved being back in England because of winter. I enjoyed 2 proper winters in a row with snow, and for the first time in a decade I went running in the snow, and that song, It's a Winter Wonderland, really hit me. Winter is about wonder. It's about stopping and enjoying the beauty of nature. It's so easy, I realise, to go through life busy and distracted. And winter is a season of rest. It's an invitation to be still. It's an invitation to be mindful. It's an invitation to enjoy the wonder of the world and God's work in the world. I think about someone like Moses. He's walking in the wilderness. Interestingly, he's walking in the wilderness and he notices the burning bush, and he drew aside. And God spoke to him. And I wonder how many times I have missed God speaking to me, either because I haven't noticed something or because I haven't paused to draw aside and be captured by the wonder of the thing I noticed. Wonder is an invitation. It's a gift to us. It's an invitation to stop and to reflect and to allow an encounter with God. And so I received that winter season as a time to be still, to do less, to draw aside, to just enjoy the wonder of it. This pilgrimage, and particularly the winter pilgrimages or the wilderness pilgrimages, are a time when we need not only the wisdom of our elders. It's not just a time when we need to pause and reflect. It's also a time where we need friendship. On this pilgrimage, we need those roadside taverns. We need those friends that we sit by the fire with and enjoy a good whiskey and a meal and talking long into the night with old friends. And I loved that about that season. I loved being with people who knew me well. I remember in January of 2012, my good friend Bob buying a flight for me to go to Nepal, and we had a week trekking in the Himalayas, and it was amazing at 3,000 metres above sea level to sit in a tea house late at night, sipping whiskey by the fire with him and writing in my journal. It was freezing cold, but it was clear, starry night, and in the daytime you could see Annapurna South, and you were surrounded by these 7,000 metre peaks. And one day we scrambled up to this ridge. It was 3,200 metres. And he had a phone on him. And I phoned home and I spoke to Miranda and the girls from this ridge high up in the Himalayas. And beside me there was a cairn and some Buddhist prayer flags. And I stood there just marvelling at the beauty. The peaks bathed in this orange light, speaking to my girls back home. And then I ran down this snowy hillside, whooping and singing, God is great, sing his praise, all the earth, all the heavens, for we're living for the glory of his name. There was something about good friends, beautiful places, that brought peace to me in the midst of what was a difficult season. So in that winter season, I needed good friends. I needed those lovely treats like being in nature, being in a beautiful place. I needed to be able to marvel at the beauty and the wonder of creation. I needed time to reflect. I needed to give space for God to prune certain things from my life so that I could eventually emerge out of that winter season, come out of that cave, come out of that long boomslang cave into a different world and find my place back in it. It's not easy. Transition, winter, it's not easy, but it can be a season of liberation. It's an invitation. Now, if life is more about who I am becoming than what I do for God, if it's about my life, which my life is my message, if that's what life is about, who I am becoming, then these seasons of pruning are an amazing gift to us. A gift for cutting away excess baggage. A gift to make us more fruitful. We're all going through a season like this right now. This lockdown time is a dark cave for many people. We've come in from one side of the mountain, and we're going to come out on the other side. Eventually this will pass, but we're going to come out into a different world. It's going to look different, and our place in it will be different. And so I'm wondering even today, as I'm telling this story, what the invitation is for each of us. Who am I becoming? What is God inviting me to leave behind? What is he wanting to prune away from me?